Hello, everybody, and welcome to the International Department series of interviews and podcasts. The first one that we're going to air today is focusing on the coach abroad. So I joined the club 4 years ago when we were delivering heavily out in Inner Mongolia in China. And so we have those experiences. Well, I certainly have those experiences. And since then, we've also delivered in Indonesia and more increasingly in North America, as well as the roles that we perform day to day at the club, whether that be with the under 16s or under 18s in mine and Matt's case. So welcome to today's set of questions. We're joined by two other people with international experience. I'll introduce you again to Matt and Al and let them just introduce a little bit about their experiences abroad. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, hi guys, my name's Matt, coach with the international department, and similar to Dan, really been here for 4 years, and I've coached abroad in China, Indonesia, the US and Canada, and it's just sort of interesting to sort of start the discussion on what what it's like coaching abroad and how that has impacted certainly myself as a coach and how I now coach here in the UK and what I've picked up from different countries and cultures. So it'll be looking forward to talking through it. But, Al, if you want to sort of introduce yourself again.
Yeah, and as a hat trick of employees, I also have been at the club for 4 years. I came in with Dan doing the under 13s at the time, and through the years I've moved more into the international department, and as I say, I've focused my overseas coaching over in China.
Brilliant. So I think just to kick things off, we might discuss, because all three of us have experience out in China, and certainly for me, I had a lot of experience comparative here in the UK. I'd worked at a Cat 1 academy before. I'd worked with you, Al, with the 13s. I'd worked with the 16s. But then all of a sudden was taken and planted out in the elite training camp in Hainan with our contract that we were delivering with the Inner Mongolian government. So I think for me, first thing when I got out there, it was a bit of a culture shock, and it's just getting used to your surroundings and your bearings to begin with. Did you have similar experience when you first went out there, Al?
Yeah, I did. I think that one of the first things that I thought of was how over back home we have a lot of structure to everything. So meeting at 11 o'clock and followed by lunch at 12 and everything else. I would be sitting in my room, a little bit of downtime, and I'd get a knock on the door, and it's, "Are you ready for a meeting right now?" with no prior warning. And the structure without there being structure over in China, and that was something the way you sort of have to adapt and think, yeah, no problems, straight out. And next thing you're delivering a meeting for 30 coaches. So it is just that reactiveness of there being no prior warning through a structure.
So be prepared to be unprepared. Matt, would you
say?
Yeah, I think so. I think it sort of changes all the time, because the way that China is very, very structured in the way that the kids growing up have to do things. So when you're doing it, see a Chinese coach do a session with Chinese kids, it is quite structured in the way that they need to do this part of the session, then this, then this, then this, then this. But then when it comes to, like Al just said, throwing those last minute sort of curveballs, that you need to be ready to do it. So it is completely different. Whereas in the UK, in terms of a session, we might have a session plan, but you sort of adapt the way that it goes, what the players are responding to better in that session, or what you want to get more out of as the session goes on. So it's interesting, the differences in structure, because there's structure without being structure. Yeah.
I found that when you're coaching abroad, and it's different in different regions, there's different expectations of the coach. So we're all used to the expectations of the coach in the UK, and that changes when you go over to North America, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But the expectations of your delivery in China is very sort of autocratic. Like, everything's expected of you, and it's sort of all eyes on you when you stop to say something, and that's quite unnerving at times because you're not used to that in England. You're used to sort of working as you go along and working with players as they're playing, and you don't like stopping the session too much. What I found out in China, just simply a little bit to do with their expectations on us, is they're waiting for it to be stopped so they can be told what to do, and then it's up to them to go and experience that. Did you find similar sorts of experiences out in Hainan now?
Yeah, exactly that. And I think through the coaching process as well, it had to be autocratic, just because the obvious language barrier. So you're delivering your session and you've got an interpreter on your left or right shoulder. You have to be short, sharp and concise with the information that you give. But you can't go into any Q&A with the players because it would eat up into too much of the session. So it was a case of you have to be autocratic, in, out, nice and quick, sharp, because then the translator has got to do the same job as you. So that multiplies your information twice by way of time to the session. And then there's a disruption to the flow. So you had to sort of be in and out really quick. Yeah.
Very much your comfort zone. And I think that that's the best part for me of being abroad, is that you're always outside of your comfort zone. It's something completely different to what you're used to. And then being able to cope with that and adapt to deal with that, I think then it only enhances you as a coach to be better prepared when you come back to the UK, where it is a lot more structured, and you can sort of, where if something happened there, you're then more equipped to deal with something like that. Whereas other coaches that might not have been abroad might struggle in that sort of way.
I certainly found myself when I returned to the UK being a lot more visual, or being more appreciative of visual cues within sessions. So, you're heavily reliant on those 2 or 3 phrases that you can pick up in Mandarin. And that's the same in North America. The language, although it's English, it's very different. The football English is different, if you like. So those 2 or 3 phrases that can have an impact on people, you sort of lean on them. But the rest of it, it's more demonstration. It's more visual cues with a tactics board maybe, or you're laying things out on the ground for people to visualize, and you're trying to show them visually as the translator's talking. And I found I became a lot more creative in the way that I was able to do that the more time that I spent out there.
I think that that comes with embracing the culture. As soon as you get there, you just need to embrace it. Because if you don't embrace the culture, then you're not going to be able to learn that about the culture, if that makes sense. So like in Mongolia, I know everyone's had experience of it, the history that they've got in battles and war. So a lot of your terminology might be battle related or war related, to be able to get them to understand what you're talking about. And then it does come across. So, but you don't get that without embracing the culture. As soon as you land in that country, you've got to be straight on it.
We have had a question in from Mr. Du. He's one of the coaches that we delivered with out in Hainan, Chinese coach. And he asks the question, how are we able to adapt without being able to speak the language? How do we overcome that language barrier? Now, I know we've touched on it briefly, but for me, the first thing I'd say is relationships are huge, and it doesn't matter what culture, what language, what country you're in. It does not matter if you have to have that bond and a connection with people from the start. And I found that very easy in China, because you're with your translators, they're your voice, and they're the people that you need to strike that relationship up with for you to be able to express yourself in the best way as a coach. So in answer to the question for myself, I'd say relationships are key, your translator's key, and try and do as much visually as you possibly can while picking up those 2 or 3 key phrases. Is there anything that you would add to that, Matt, at all, or that pretty much hit it?
Yeah, definitely. I think the translator one's a big one, because especially in Mandarin, it's very tough to convey the message.
It's all right for you. You can speak the language. You're close to being fluent. But for Al and I was glued to me translator's hip. He was trying to get rid of me like a bad smell.
Oh, no, I can do it. But at the same time, yeah, you need to be careful with it because you say something and then they've obviously got to translate it. So that's twice the time to get 1 point across. So immediately in an hour-long session, instead of you've got a half of that time is you're speaking and half the translator speaking. So you've got to think then about your planning of your session, how long you're going to be doing each part for, your interventions and everything like that, knowing that the translator's got to speak X amount of time. And some things like counter-attack, for example, 2 words for us. I know the translators try and get that across to the players. It takes them a good 20 seconds, 30 seconds. You don't know if they're saying what you've asked them to say or not. And that's another challenge because he might have interpreted it slightly wrong. So you're having to deal with that. But the planning then comes into it massively at the start of your session. You've got to be well prepared, and you've got to be well prepared for quite a lot of eventualities. And timekeeping is one of they say the step principle, don't they, here in with the FA and the UK, and I think that's really relevant when abroad, certainly in China.
I think if you've built up those relationships that we talked about and you've embraced their culture and their way of doing things, although we're there for a reason, that they want to sort of pick up different aspects of coaching from a professional football club in the UK. It's that respect that we have to have of the way that they work, because they're 5,000 years of developing and a culture. So you're not going to all of a sudden just fly over from the Wirral and go and change that. So you have to embrace it. And if they say that they want to take you out for a meal and have some bajo to celebrate, even if it's not your favoured tipple of choice, then you've still got to get up there, do a speech, say thanks for having me. And then when it comes to it the next day, when you're sitting with the translator, those little sort of moments that you have away from the pitch all add up to you improving your understanding of the culture and how you can get your points across when you are coaching.
Yeah, I'd just echo that as well, Dan. And what I would say is that the relationship with the interpreter when I was out there was fundamental and it was key. I think we've been blessed with the interpreters that we've had over the years as well, that they're just top blokes, but they're also aspiring coaches themselves. So what I took extra time to do is that away from the pitch and away from the football and everything else, was answer their questions. So what does this term mean and what does this? And there was pages of what they had picked up from English commentary, but they didn't know what it actually meant. So I went through it all, and I think tactically as well, the Chinese coaches love anything on a tactics board. So like what you said, the tactics board become your best friend. So when I was delivering the coach education in the classroom, quite often what I would do is I would keep the information short, audio, but then explain it on a tactics board behind me. And then whilst I was explaining on the tactics board, the interpreter then could then give the information that I'd delivered to the coaches. And that then opened up a little bit of an opportunity for a little bit of Q&A. And there was good engagement with that as well.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And it sort of all relates, because in America and the language barrier is less of an issue. But in Indonesia, again, when coaching out, we've had some translators that haven't been as good as the ones we've had in China. It's a lot tougher. So you've got to be the use of a tactics board or throwing bibs down to mark out and using different colours and like demos and stuff like that. You've got to be really on point with that, especially out in Indonesia, because whilst again they're amazing people, some of the best people you could possibly meet, it was tough at times with the translator. But again, it's just adapting and having all those different experiences makes you more fine-tuned to be able to do that.
We had a couple of experiences, didn't we, in Indonesia? We had, Matt and I, we had one where we were delivering Coach Ed, and the translation wasn't very good. You could just tell, you could sense that the messages weren't getting across to people. So we did a lot visually there, didn't we? And we were lucky that there were the pair of us working in tandem. You were working one group, I was working the defence, playing out, you were working the attack, and it worked quite well in the end, because we did have everything structured on a board for them. Like, we had the setup of the session and that got translated. So down on paper, it made more sense than when people were talking it through, which we're quite fortunate. But the other experience that springs to mind in Indonesia, and again, coming back to your point, Al, of being, prepared to be unprepared, is when Matt and I we planned out a session, a show demonstration session, if you like, easy for me to say, with a group of 10 players. And then when we got to the pitch to do it at this fine stadium in Jakarta, we got 60 players turn up, was it, Matt? And then another 10 came, and then another 10 came, and we had like 40, 50 players each. So that was crazy. But if you want to just talk us through what was going through your mind during that experience, Matt.
I think it was the sort of rush. Like, everyone had turned up expecting English coaches to come and just put on the session that they'd been after. So arriving at the stadium, and it was hot. It was like 35, 40 degrees, wasn't it? It was boiling. And we arrived and we saw all the players. We're like, we need to go put some sun cream on. Give us a couple of minutes.
Yeah, that was we got ourselves a little break, didn't we? Where we had a little conflab while we were putting the sun cream on.
I think that, luckily, the session that we had planned was adaptable to the point where we could actually relate it to that. And even worse was the fact, I think we had 2 footballs each or 3 footballs each for each group. So we had 6 footballs for like 70, 80 players and like 10 bibs. That was difficult, but I mean, the experience of it was incredible. And again, 45-minute long session it was meant to be. And then after 45 minutes, they added on another 45 minutes. Everything, like the step principle, we talk about space. I mean, it was carnage. Time, well, that doubled. Equipment we didn't have, and people just kept on growing. So it was tough. But I remember we then had to get that flight home, flight back to Jakarta, didn't we? Stinking, the plane out straight from a 40-degree session. But the feeling you get from being able to do that session and it went down really well, and that was a really good feeling. A really good feeling. And I think they're the moments as a coach that you look back on and you never forget them.
Yeah, you certainly learn a lot about yourself, don't you, in those difficult moments, and learn what you can do, and hopefully if you're put in that situation again, we're able to pass that knowledge on then, and we won't be faced with such a daunting task again. I've had another question through, this time focusing a little bit more over to North America. So Vasco Nunes from Halton Hawks in Canada, he said, how do you account for the different sort of cultural expectations on football or soccer as it is in North America? Because I think it's a great question, because we're quite fortunate in the northwest of England. It is football central. We've got huge, number of clubs all the way from the Premier League down to step 10 in non-league. So football is very much part of our day-to-day culture. So when we go abroad, it might not necessarily be the number one sport in the States or in Canada. So have you had any thoughts about, when you've been out delivering, Al, what sort of things that you can do to sort of help out in that regard?
Well, I think going back to the China link, the culture, like we've already touched on, is just entirely different, and they come from a history where their football is evident from their history, in that it's very territorial based. So we would describe it probably as Route 1 back home, but you could see, and it sort of was like a game of tennis on a full-size football pitch at times. And it's just trying to implement and adapt the changes from back here as to how to play football, how we look to build from the back, for instance, now. But Rome wasn't built in a day, so it's not a case of going in there and saying, right, you're doing it all wrong, and look to play this way. It's about maybe looking to sort of plant seeds and let them seeds grow over time. But that was an obvious big culture change as to how they play football. Based on probably the country's history.
I feel similarly to when I have been out in the States, that you are influenced by the culture in which you're delivering. So yeah, very territorial in China, and I think whenever I've been out delivering in America or North America, you feel the influence from the other sports. So from the other major sports, and I know the American college system. If you see a game from the college system, they play 2-3 games, back to back, and they'll play on days, and they'll have massive rotations of the squads, and you can see influences from American football, from baseball, from the way that the coaches set them up and the expectations of the players as well. So yeah, one thing that I'd say to that is that whenever I've been away, it's not a case of, oh, that's your culture, this is our culture, you're going to do what we do. It's you're working with the way that they have things. Like, you're trying to take out the benefits from the way that they do play. So, for example, in China, yes, they're very territorial, but I'd say ultra competitive. So you're sort of harnessing that competitive attitude that they've got and playing against each other. And for me in the States, the sort of coordination and the physicality of the players is probably more than what we'd expect from our under 16s, 17s, 18s here in the UK. So again, you're harnessing those physical attributes and trying to develop them and make them better players by using them. Would you say the same, Matt? Would you say something similar?
Yeah, definitely. Because we've had some American players come over to Tranmere, and they've trained with our under 18s, and some of them were 19 years old, some were a bit younger. But they're very athletic, and on the fitness and all of that during pre-season, they I think they were at the top of near the top of the rankings for that, or they were at the top of the rankings for it. But when it came to the more technical side of things, they were at the complete other end of the scale. But on the athletic side, over in America, it's massive, absolutely huge, and that just comes from all the different sports they play, how fit you've got to be to play basketball. That game is crazy, like ice hockey in Canada as well. It's the same, but you see the traits of those sports come out in football. In basketball, the low center of gravity in a lot of situations, and being able to turn and twist away. You see that a lot, I think, in the game, which is great. So, and I think what you said is right. You've got to have that mindset of going over to a foreign country and working with those players and those coaches together. Because we learn off them all the time. That's what we're talking about here, really, is what we've learned. And hopefully they're learning a lot of stuff from us. So you go out there and together, that's how you build the relationship. The relationship's got to be there, which is dead important. And then you start to get a common ground and you grow it up. Whereas I think from what we've been told out in the States, there's a lot of clubs that have gone over and said, right, we're doing it this way, and this is the way we're going to do it, and use the English sort of method rather than actually communicating and understanding that, hang on, the States are actually, the level of football is massively improving. People don't realise the scale of it out there is absolutely massive. So you've got to go over there, be open-minded, and then all together come together and really find the right way, find the right methods for everyone.
There's no short-term fix on any of this, and even when you say that America are developing, Canada as well with their Premier League up and running. When COVID finally, when we get to the bottom of finding a vaccine, that'll be pretty much a great part where we can go and develop, hopefully. So yeah, I'd say it's definitely, it's important that you've got to know, where you're working and the people that you're working with. But I think that you're also looking for people that want to improve and want to learn from a different style that maybe we have. And I think for America, a lot of the pull is that they're working with a professional football club. So our experience is working with pro players and working with younger players. They might not necessarily have that within their club setup. So I think that the next part for me is coach education is huge. So, when we've been and delivered at our best abroad, yes, we might work with a group of players and we might look to develop those players, but you have more of an impact if you can impact the coach and sort of, set a light bulb off or give them some way of developing, so that when you leave when you leave Inner Mongolia or when you leave Toronto, then something remains there. There's a way of learning and a way of wanting to improve, and a way of staying in contact with them to monitor that improvement.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I think I'd just jump back in there again, and I'd say that, from the time in China, the way I which that I delivered the coach education side was, I'd watched games out on the pitch, and I'd identified that it was, let's call it Route 1, direct football. And that's what they all tended to play. And we understand the basis of that. So through the conversations we had in the classroom, it was, what teams do you follow? And they all are idolised by the Premier League. It's the world best league. So they say, we love the way Liverpool play or whatever else. So then I would hone in on that, and I'd say, right, okay, so when that ball goes forward, if you can link it to a Liverpool where they counter-press really well, and that might be your next coaching point. So how can you counter-press better than what you do ordinarily? And then develop that conversation on, so that when the ball goes long for the first 10 minutes of a game, how would your defence sit? Well, we'd probably go into a mid or low block. Right, okay, so you've put your opposition further back, which then allows the space for you to play out. So you can mix it up. It's not saying you have to play out from the back or anything like that. It's again, planting them seeds and giving the coaches the different ideas on how to understand the games when they're live right in front of you.
And I think that the other one is that certainly in China and in America, winning is one of the main things. It can be from under sixes all the way through to under 21s, but winning the game is the most important thing, which obviously it's important in the UK, but in terms of the long-term player development model, at under 7s, 8s, 9s, are you really focused on the main outcome of what you're trying to get in that match being the result? Or is it mainly about trying to work, getting to see what you've done in the sessions during the week and trying to see that come out in the game and see your players try and you might not win the game, but you're seeing progress in the development of the players, and that's in the long term, that's the biggest win you're going to have. And I think a lot of that, so parents in North America is a big one, because football, soccer, to go to college and get a college scholarship is the goal, really, because we can sort of relate to it as being offered a scholarship in England at an academy, but for Americans, that's the one, going to college and getting offered a scholarship there. So, and they only really focus on results. They focus on their kid. They don't focus on the whole team. They don't care what their best mates are doing. They want to get their son or daughter into college. And it's the same in China and Hainan. I remember you saying, Al, like, the coaches, a lot of them were having their next year's salary based on that tournament. Yeah. So they want to win. They don't care how they do it. They want to win. So there's a big sacrifice to be made, I think. And I think getting that point across in the coach education side is one of the biggest points.
Same time, yeah, that's great point. And I've sort of felt that myself when I've been, especially out in China, when you say, Al, when it, when somebody's job's on the line because of their results with an under 16s team, it might sound crazy to us in the UK, but when you go abroad, so when you go to Hainan, if you then sit down with this coach and say, I want to do this, this and this, and it doesn't really matter if we lose because the players will develop and they'll learn, not interested, switched off straight away. So you've got to find a way to relate that and find a way for them to probably move a little bit closer to the way that we want to develop players, but not losing too much of the competitive nature in which they've bred to be in. So you've got to find a way for them. You've got to use your tactical head, your scouting head, your all kinds of different things are coming into it. Where can we get the best out of this group of players for this coach so that they win the game? But can I still plant something where the players are developing themselves? And for me, a massive thing was developing a love for the game. So they've got to love that game. If a young Chinese player or American player, don't love it, are they going to take a ball and strike it against the wall and go to the park and practice and hone those technical skills with the friends? Probably not. So you've got to find a way of doing both. You've got to get them to love it, set them little homework challenges. Can they keep improving and can they see that improvement? But at the same time, realise that where you're working in, results do matter a lot more for them than perhaps what we're used to.
Yeah. Like the love of the game is the biggest one, isn't it? Because and what you can do with it. So Indonesia, without a doubt, the biggest sport over there is football. Now, I don't know if they didn't know Indonesia and they just had to guess what the biggest sport is over there. I don't know how many people would say football until you've actually been there and see how crazy it is for the local teams. But they have for the Premier League as well. It's absolutely incredible. So you get players that know that if they, and we've been lucky enough to work with some of the some really talented Indonesian players, and some of them will go on to be really good footballers and make a living and earn money for the family and stuff like that. And the love of the game is generated at a young age, I think, over in Indonesia, similar to what it is in Brazil, when they're out playing in the streets, and you just have to look at the amount of talent that Brazil's produced. So being able to generate that love for the game in those countries. And I think that's starting to happen now in China and in America and Canada as well. I think they're really, if you go back and compare it to now, it's massive, the change, massive.
Oh, certainly. We've talked, just conscious of time here, guys, but we've talked, a little bit about each region and the differences in those regions, a couple of experiences. Anything more to add on when you've been away, anything that you weren't sort of expecting or caught you by surprise when you were away, Al?
I think the obvious one for me was, it was when I'd landed and not knowing anything before, so landing roasting hot, and I've got my big Tranmere padded winter jacket on, so that comes off straight away. I've got a transfer from a guy who's holding my WhatsApp video photo up next to me saying, that you, yeah. So straight off. And it was just the whole culture that sort of hit you immediately, that you are outside your comfort zone. So it's adapt, think on your feet and think on your feet quick and just roll with it. So, yeah, I mean, nothing else really sort of springs to mind. It's just opening your eyes to something that is just totally different.
So during the 4 years I've been at the club, we must have found opportunities for 40, 50 coaches abroad, and we've placed them in China, in the States, and for me, the ones that they've not all been a success story, but the ones that have, they've all had that mindset of, I'm going to improve, I'm going to think on my feet, I'm going to sort of, especially in the early days, adapt to the culture and accept it. And then once they accept me for who I am, then I'll have more of an impact on how I'm able to coach. So, I'd say we've still got sort of 7, 8 high quality coaches based abroad, and the ones that have stayed are the ones that have had that mindset. So it's, it strikes home again when you put it like that, Al, that how important that is when you get there, that ability to roll with it, but then also have the knowledge and the backing of a professional football club when it comes to it, and to back you up. So I think last thing I'm going to say is I was very fortunate when I went out to Hainan to begin with. Lots of contact from the club, lots of support in terms of resources, session plans, people that have maybe been in that situation before. And I'd like to hope that, the relationships that we've built up with clubs, college sides in the States, in Canada and in China and Indonesia, that they have that relationship with us where they can still tap into those resources and our experiences from being abroad.
Definitely. I think the biggest advice would be to go and do it, go abroad, and it won't be easy. It never is, but do it, because you'll come back a better coach 100%. If you immerse yourself fully in the culture, and you think on your feet and you're willing to adapt and you're open-minded, the amount of success you'll have is there's no end to it. There really isn't.
Right. Okay, so that concludes the first in the series of interviews, podcasts with us guys at Tranmere Rovers. The next one will be with our youth team manager, Andy Parkinson. So we'll look forward to welcoming your questions that we can put forward to Andy in the coming days. But for us from now, thanks very much for listening, and see you again soon.
Later, guys.